Could you bear it? If you discovered your wife was having an affair with your own brother, and together they were setting a trap to frame you as a criminal so they could steal your company, your reputation, and your entire life. My name is Nick Harrow, a middle-aged man who once believed he had everything a strong home. I designed with my own hands, a thriving career as an architect, and a smart, beautiful wife. I believed that if I worked hard, stayed loyal, and built steadily, happiness would last. But then on one storm-soaked night, that belief collapsed. Imagine this, the woman who sleeps beside you each night, whispering vows of love, secretly plotting your death with your own brother. And the cruelty doesn't stop at betrayal of the heart. They don't just want to take your wife or your trust. They want to destroy your name, forge your signature, and leave you branded as a fraud in the eyes of everyone you've ever worked with. That was the truth I had to face. And in that moment, I realized I could either collapse under the weight of betrayal or fight back with everything I had left. This is my story. If you've ever believed your life was safe, stay with me, because what came next was far worse. Follow this story to the end and you'll see why a man can lose everything, yet still refuse to fall. The night it all began, our Victorian house glowed with candlelight and the steady drumming of rain on the windows. I thought it was just another Friday get-together. My wife Vivian, her best friend Sienna, and my younger brother Eric, who had been crashing in our guest room far too long. The whiskey was flowing. The air smelled of wet leaves and old wood. And for a moment, I almost believed life was normal. But the game changed everything. Vivian leaned forward, her silk blouse catching the flicker of the candles, and purred, "Truth or dare." Her emerald eyes locked on me, and though her tone was playful, something beneath it made my stomach tighten. I chose truth, always the safe choice. As an architect, I built my career on foundations, on certainty, on measurements that never lied. Truth felt solid, but what came next cracked that foundation. Vivian smiled, almost tender, then asked the question that silenced the room. "Do you ever regret marrying me instead of someone more exciting?" The storm outside seemed to echo inside my chest. My wife's lips curved, my brother smirked in the shadows, and I suddenly realized this wasn't a harmless game. It was the first brick of a trap being built around me. The silence after Vivian's question stretched like a wire pulled too tight. I forced a laugh, tried to shake it off, but inside my chest something cracked. Do I regret marrying you? The woman I'd built a life with, the woman who stood beside me when I poured every ounce of myself into my firm. I wanted to believe it was a drunken tease, but her eyes told me otherwise. There was a sharpness there, a restless hunger I had either ignored or never noticed. And then, almost casually, she added her gaze, sliding toward Eric. Lately, I wonder what life would have been like if I'd chosen differently. Someone who takes risks, someone unafraid to go after what they want. Her words hit me harder than any storm outside. My younger brother shifted in his chair, suddenly fascinated with his drink, as if the table had become too heavy with secrets. Sienna let out a nervous giggle that only made the tension worse. I sat frozen, whiskey burning down my throat, realizing the ground beneath me wasn't solid after all. The woman I loved wasn't just questioning our marriage, she was hinting at an answer I wasn't ready to face. Vivian broke the tension before I could respond. She grabbed the empty wine bottle from the center of the table and spun it with a flick of her wrist. The glass glided across the mahogany surface, clinking softly until it pointed at Eric. "Truth or dare, little brother?" she asked, her voice smooth, almost playful. But the way she lingered on little brother made my skin crawl. It didn't sound like family, it sounded like something else. Eric grinned, leaning back in his chair with that cocky ease he'd never outgrown. "Dare," he said, too quick, too confident, as if he'd been waiting for this. Vivian's smile sharpened. "I dare you to tell Nick what you really think about his life choices." The grin slipped from Eric's face for a fraction of a second. He opened his mouth, closed it, then shrugged as if to say, "Why not?" "Fine. You want honesty." He leaned forward, elbows on the table, his eyes locked on mine. "I think you're wasting your life. You've got the big house, the firm, the picture-perfect wife. And you're boring, safe, predictable. Exactly what I never want to become." The rain hammered harder against the glass, or maybe it was just the blood pounding in my ears. I stood up so fast my chair scraped across the hardwood floor. My pulse was pounding not just from Eric's words, but from the smug way he delivered them, like he'd been rehearsing that speech for months. "You're living off my roof, my food, my charity," I shot back. 3 months in my guest room, Eric, and you have the nerve to call me boring." Eric rose. 2, chest puffed, eyes flashing. "At least I'm honest." At least I don't live in denial. Denial. The word cut deeper than I expected. That's when Vivian stepped between us. Graceful calm, like she'd been waiting for this very moment. One hand pressed gently against my chest, the other rested on Eric's. A peacekeeper's pose, but what I saw wasn't peace at all. Her fingers lingered on my brother's shirt, not on mine. I watched the way his breathing changed under her touch, quick, shallow. Neither of them met my eyes. It was subtle, a second too long, a softness too familiar, but in that tiny gesture, the truth roared louder than any thunder outside. "I need some air," I muttered, stepping back before I broke something. "Nick, don't be dramatic," Vivian called after me, but it was too late. The air inside that house was already poisoned. I grabbed my jacket from the hall closet and stepped out onto the porch. The storm swallowed me whole. Rain lashed against my face, soaking me within seconds, but I barely felt it. My chest was too tight, my thoughts too loud. The wraparound porch creaked beneath my boots, the very boards I had designed and installed with my own hands. Once this house had felt like proof that I'd made it a dream realized. Tonight, it felt like a coffin closing in. Through the dining room window, I could see them. Vivian leaned toward Eric, her hand brushing his arm as Sienna gestured nervously between them, like a referee out of her depth, their heads bent close together, too close, their lips moving in whispers meant for no one else. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Vivian lit the screen. "Come back inside. We need to talk." Another message followed. "Nick, please." It's not what you think, but it was exactly what I thought. Every detail, every look, every touch, they were puzzle pieces snapping into place with brutal precision. I climbed into my truck, turned the key, and felt the engine rumble. For once, something in my life still worked the way it was supposed to. The wipers squealed across the windshield as I drove through sheets of rain. Streetlights blurred into streaks of gold and white, the town around me half asleep, half drowned. I didn't know where else to go, but my hands found the wheel, turning toward the only place that made sense. Terry Doyle's apartment. We'd been college roommates once, both full of big dreams. I'd built houses. He'd built a career as a cop. But after 20 years of chasing criminals, Terry had swapped a badge for a private investigator's license and a modest office above Main Street. If anyone could cut through the fog clouding my life, it was him. By the time I climbed his narrow stairwell, my clothes clung to me like second skin. Terry opened the door, his weathered face unreadable. He looked me over, my drenched jacket, my hollow eyes. "Jesus, Nick," he muttered. "What happened to you?" I swallowed hard. My throat burned like the whiskey I'd left behind. "I think my wife is sleeping with my brother," I said flatly. "And that's not even the worst part." He didn't flinch, just stepped aside, motioned me in. "Come on, let's get you dry. Start from the beginning." And so I did. Terry handed me a towel and a steaming mug of coffee. The heat seeped into my hands, but the chill inside me stayed. He leaned back in his worn recliner notepad, balanced on his knee, and said quietly, "Tell me everything." So I did. I told him about the looks, the touch, the way Vivian's tone softened when she said, "Little brother," about Eric lounging in my house like he owned the place, about the texts, "Come back inside, it's not what you think," lies dressed up as apologies. Terry's pen scratched the paper. "When did you first notice her pulling away?" I thought hard. It hadn't been sudden, more like erosion, a slow crumbling of something I thought was solid. 3 months ago, maybe more. She started working late, taking business calls at odd hours. Suddenly, she had conferences, trips, emergencies I wasn't invited to. I figured it was the stress of her consulting clients. But even as I spoke, I realized the timing matched perfectly with Eric's arrival. The moment he stepped into our guest room, Vivian started stepping out of our marriage. Terry nodded slowly. Patterns like that don't happen by accident. Trust me, I've seen it too many times. And just like that, my worst suspicions no longer felt like paranoia. They felt like evidence. Terry set his pen down, his eyes steady on mine. "Nick, you need to be absolutely sure. Sometimes when a man starts looking for betrayal, he finds shadows, even where there aren't any." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to cling to the idea that I was wrong, that this was just stress and whiskey twisting my perception. But the images kept flashing back, Vivian's hand pressed against Eric's chest, the way his breathing changed under her touch, the stolen glances, the unspoken language between them. I leaned forward, my voice low and raw. "No, Terry, I'm not imagining this. I know what I saw. I know what I felt." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. "All right, If you're certain, then we treat this like what it is, a potential conspiracy, which means you don't confront them yet. You watch. You listen. You collect proof before they know you're onto them. I gripped the mug so tight, my knuckles whitened. Proof. That was the word. Not suspicion, not paranoia proof. Because deep down, I already knew my wife and my brother weren't just betraying me in secret. They were planning something far worse. I sat there in Terry's apartment, the rain rattling the windows like a warning I should have listened to months ago. My head throbbed with the weight of everything I'd just said out loud. For weeks, I'd been telling myself this was nothing, just stress, just coincidence, just my imagination running wild. But now that the words had left my mouth, there was no taking them back. Terry leaned forward, elbows on his knees. So, here's the question, Nick. What do you want to do about it? Confront them, throw Eric out, file for divorce, burn it all down, and walk away. Each option flared in my mind like lightning, but none of them gave me what I truly needed. I want the truth, I said finally. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. All of it. How long this has been happening. What they're planning. If it's just an affair. Or something bigger. Terry gave a slow nod like he'd been waiting for me to say exactly that. Once you know, you can't unknow it. Sometimes the truth is worse than the lie. Then so be it, I muttered. I need to see the foundation for what it really is, even if it's already cracked beyond repair. The next morning, sunlight crept through the curtains, but it felt colder than any storm. I woke later than usual, disoriented. Vivian's side of the bed already empty. The house carried a sound I couldn't mistake: laughter, light, easy, familiar. I followed it downstairs. In the kitchen, Vivian stood at the stove, hair tied in a messy bun, wearing the silk robe I'd bought her for Christmas. Beside her, Eric lounged at the island in pajama pants, scrolling his phone like he belonged there. The smell of bacon filled the air, but it turned my stomach. "Morning sunshine," Eric said without looking up. His voice dripped with mockery. "Rough night," Vivian added lightly, sliding scrambled eggs onto 3 plates. I poured myself coffee, forcing my voice calm. "Thanks for cleaning up after the party. Sienna helped before she left," Vivian replied, not meeting my eyes. "We weren't sure if you were coming back." Eric smirked, still glued to his screen. "Walking out into a thunderstorm for some air. Pretty dramatic, don't you think?" I stared at him, searching for even a flicker of shame. Nothing, just smugness and something else. Ownership. And in that moment, I realized my house no longer felt like mine. I sipped the coffee, slowly letting the bitter taste anchor me while my eyes stayed fixed on them. Vivian moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, sliding toast onto plates, her robe swaying lightly as if nothing had changed. But I saw the subtle shift in her body language, her hand brushing Eric's arm when she passed him, the way their shoulders almost touched when they leaned close to share some private joke. Then she dropped it casually, like it was nothing. "I'm thinking about taking a trip. There's a conference in Portland next weekend." "Portland, Oregon," I asked, though I already knew. "Maine," she corrected smoothly. "Only a couple hours drive." Eric perked up instantly. "Hey, I could drive you. Been meaning to check out the food truck scene up there." The look they exchanged lasted only a second, but it was enough. A flicker of anticipation, of shared understanding. "That's not necessary," I said quickly. "I can drive her if she needs." Vivian didn't look at me. Eric already offered. "And you've got that Morrison project on Monday. You don't need extra stress." The Morrison project, my firm's biggest chance in years. The timing wasn't just convenient. It was deliberate. And that's when suspicion hardened into something else: certainty. I tried to bury myself in work that morning, shuffling Morrison project notes across my desk, but I couldn't focus. Through the office window, I could see them in the backyard, Vivian, in a sundress I'd never seen before, laughing, as Eric spun her in a slow circle like some high school couple at prom. Every gesture screamed intimacy. Every glance was a knife. My phone buzzed. Terry's voice came through without preamble. "Nick, I ran some checks last night. Your wife's been on the phone with a number registered to your brother. 47 calls in the last month, some lasting over an hour." I gripped the receiver tighter. "When all times, late nights, early mornings, hours you weren't around. They're timing it to avoid you." My stomach sank. What else? Eric's credit card show hotel charges. 3 different locations. Dates line up with Vivian's so-called business trips. I can't prove she was there yet. But the odds aren't in your favor. I stared out the window again. Vivian's hand lingered on Eric's arm as she laughed, his eyes following her every move like she belonged to him. Proof. Not just suspicion anymore. My marriage wasn't cracked, it was collapsing. That afternoon, I forced myself back to the Morrison files, flipping through contracts and proposals, trying to find stability in the neat lines and signatures. Architecture had always been about control for me, blueprints, measurements, foundations that obeyed the rules. But buried in the stack of routine paperwork, I found something that didn't fit. A beneficiary change form for my business life insurance policy. At first glance, it looked like my signature. Same slant, same flourish. But something about the pen pressure was off. Too heavy in places, too smooth in others. My gut clenched. I checked the details. The beneficiary had been changed from Vivian to Eric. My hand shook as I called my insurance agent. "Mr. Harrow, good to hear from you," he said politely. "I need to verify a beneficiary change on my business policy. When was it submitted?" A pause, then papers shuffling. 3 weeks ago, signed and notarized, brought in by your brother Eric. He said you were too busy with the big project. The Morrison project. My 18-hour days. Eric had easy access to my office, my files, my signatures. The policy was worth $2 million. And suddenly, my brother had everything to gain from my death. I hung up the phone without saying goodbye. My pulse hammered in my ears as I walked upstairs, each step heavier than the last. If Eric could forge my signature once, he could do it again. I needed to know how deep this went. In our bedroom, I opened Vivian's jewelry box. My hands shook as I sifted past earrings and bracelets until something sharp and out of place caught my eye, a folded piece of paper tucked behind the velvet lining. I pulled it out, heart pounding. It was a printed email. "Nick is getting suspicious. We need to move faster. The Portland trip is perfect timing. Make sure everything is ready. V." The date, yesterday. The recipient, an email address I didn't recognize. My throat went dry. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. It was a plan, a timeline. I snapped a photo with my phone and carefully placed the paper back exactly where I found it. Every instinct screamed at me to storm downstairs and confront her, but I forced myself still. Terry's words echoed proof first, then act. I realized then I wasn't just a husband betrayed. I was a target marked for removal. I searched further, every drawer, every hidden compartment I could think of. Years of living with Vivian had taught me her habits, her little secret places. In the nightstand, beneath a neat row of perfume bottles and folded notes, I found it. A cheap black burner phone. My pulse spiked. I turned it on. The screen glowed, battery still half full. The call log lit up with dozens of recent calls. Eric's number over and over. But not just him, other contacts, all unfamiliar. One labeled Marcus Kellerman. My mind snapped back to Terry mentioning that name, a real estate lawyer who specialized in dissolving partnerships. I scrolled further. Text messages, the kind of words you can't unsee. Eric insurance change went through. He never noticed. Vivian good. Portland will be the perfect alibi. Eric, you sure about the timeline? Vivian, trust me. By Monday, everything will be different. Monday. The Morrison presentation, the biggest day of my career. I took photos of every screen, every text. Then I powered the phone down and slid it back exactly where I found it. They weren't just cheating. They weren't just lying. They were planning to erase me. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the silent burner phone in my hands. My whole body felt hollow, as if the truth had scooped out everything inside me. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It wasn't paranoia. It was fact. My wife and my brother were plotting my death. The forged insurance documents proved it. The email confirmed the timeline. The burner phone spelled it out in words so casual they made me sick. Portland will be the perfect alibi. I looked around the bedroom, the same room where Vivian and I had laughed, argued, made promises. The bed where we'd once dreamed together. Now it felt like a crime scene waiting to happen. The implications crashed down on me all at once. If they expected to collect on the policy, they didn't need a divorce. They didn't need me alive. They needed me gone. By Monday, my hands clenched until my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to scream, to smash something, to wake Vivian right then and demand answers. But Terry's voice echoed in my head again. Don't confront. Gather proof. Stay alive. For the first time in my life, I realized survival wasn't just an instinct. It was going to have to be a strategy. The next morning, just as I was trying to steady my nerves with black coffee, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice on the other end was crisp, official. Mr. Harrow, this is Detective Sarah Chen with the Maine State Police. We need to speak with you about a matter concerning your business. My stomach dropped. What kind of matter? We've received allegations of financial irregularities at your firm. Nothing urgent, but we'd like you to come in and clear this up as soon as possible. Can you meet us at the station this afternoon? The words clanged in my head like a hammer on steel. Financial irregularities. Fraud. Exactly the kind of story Eric and Vivian would plant to build their narrative. After I hung up, I called Terry immediately. "They're framing me," I said. My voice shook, but not from fear alone. Rage had crept in too. "Nick, listen to me," Terry said. "If they've forged your signature once, they can do it again. Loan applications, contracts, anything. They're setting you up to look guilty." I rubbed my temple, the coffee turning bitter in my gut. Vivian and Eric didn't just want me dead. They wanted me ruined first. I paced Terry's office like a trapped animal, the storm outside replaced by one inside my chest. "How the hell do I fight this?" I muttered. "If the police already think I'm cooking the books, then every signature, every form they've touched, it all points back to me." Terry leaned back calm in a way only ex-cops can be. "First, you breathe. Second, you don't go in there alone. You bring an attorney. And third, understand this. If they're willing to risk insurance fraud and frame you, then you may not just be looking at jail time. You could be in physical danger." The words physical danger hit harder than I expected. For a moment, the room spun. My own brother, my own wife, plotting my death while I'm still paying for their meals, still trusting them with my home. I pressed my palms into the desk, forcing air into my lungs. "So, what do I do?" Terry's eyes sharpened. "You fight back, but smart. We need more than suspicion. We need hard evidence, enough to expose them before they get their chance to take you down." I swallowed hard. The panic was still there, gnawing at my gut, but beneath it, something else was beginning to grow. Resolve. Terry waited until the rain tapered off that evening before sliding a small set of keys across his desk. Eric rents a storage unit on the edge of town. Manager thought I was helping him move, so he let me copy the key. If we're lucky, it holds everything they don't want in the house. My pulse quickened. And if we're unlucky, then we're breaking and entering for nothing. But my gut says otherwise. The storage facility sat on the outskirts, a maze of metal doors under flickering floodlights. Unit 247 was tucked in the far corner away from prying eyes. The key clicked home, and with a deep breath, I rolled the door up. Boxes stacked chest high, bankers' boxes labeled with my firm's name, contracts, client files, entire drawers from my home office stripped bare and stored here. I pulled one open and felt my stomach twist. Financial records, bank statements, all altered. Signatures that looked like mine but weren't. Terry held up a manila envelope. Inside were surveillance photos of me walking to work, grabbing coffee, standing on my porch. Pages and pages of my daily routines mapped out in chilling detail. "Jesus," Nick Terry muttered. "They've been planning this for months." And suddenly I realized I wasn't just being framed. I was being hunted. I dug deeper into the stacks, my fingers numb, my heart hammering. At the bottom of one box, I froze. Rolled up paper, thick and familiar. Architectural drawings. I pulled them free and spread them across a folding table. My breath caught. It was my house, every floor, every wall, every angle I had designed years ago. But these plans were covered in new markings. Red circles around doors and windows, arrows tracing exit routes, notations about camera sightlines and blind spots. Terry leaned over my shoulder. "They've studied your home the way you study a client's building." The realization sank in like ice water. This wasn't about vague fantasies of me disappearing. They were planning the how. A staged break-in, a robbery gone wrong, or maybe something even cleaner, more clinical. My eyes drifted to the margins where someone had scribbled basement access easiest. Noise covers everything if stormy. I swallowed hard bile, burning my throat. They weren't just plotting to ruin me on paper. Psiar. They had designed my murder the way I'd design a skyscraper, precise, methodical, inevitable. Terry rested a hand on the table. "Nick, this isn't speculation anymore. This is intent." I nodded, my voice low, hollow. "They're building my death on the blueprints of my life." I kept staring at those plans until the red ink blurred, my entire life reduced to measurements and notes about how best to erase me. But then, as my eyes scanned the bottom corner of one sheet, something flickered. A handwritten reminder in Vivian's neat script, "Update will." My pulse steadied. They were working off an old will. 2 years ago, after expanding the firm, I'd quietly rewritten my estate plans. The new document left most of my assets to a foundation for architectural education. Vivian would get the house and a modest trust, but the business and the big insurance policies were earmarked elsewhere. They didn't know. They think if you die now, they walk away with everything, I murmured. But under the new will, they get almost nothing. Terry's eyes narrowed. That's your crack in their foundation. As long as that will stay secret, they either need you alive long enough to change it, or they'll try to force your hand. I exhaled slowly. For the first time all night, the terror shifted into strategy. Their plan wasn't flawless. It had a weak point. And as an architect, I knew exactly how to exploit a weak point. I rolled the blueprints back up, forcing my hands steady. Fear was still there, gnawing at me, but something else had replaced the paralysis clarity. If Vivian and Eric were building their perfect crime, then I needed to build something better. Terry watched me closely. So, what's the move? I took a breath. We don't confront them yet. We make them think they're winning. Let them keep talking, keep planning. But this time, we'll be listening. Terry nodded, already reaching for his gear bag. I've got recorders, micro cams, GPS trackers. We'll bug your office, your truck, even the damn dining room if we have to. If they slip, we'll have it on tape. I almost smiled at the irony. Me, a man who'd built structures to last centuries, now forced to build a trap in my own home. But that's what it had come to. They're expecting me to crack, I said, to spiral under pressure. If I play that part, they'll let their guard down. Terry raised his coffee mug. Then we play dirty. We make them confess to their own game. I clinked my mug against his. My life was collapsing, but maybe, just maybe, I could design the demolition myself. The next morning, I buried myself in the Morrison presentation, though the words and diagrams blurred across the page. Every hour felt like a countdown. If Vivian and Eric planned to make their move by Monday, then time was no longer on my side. At 11:30, my phone lit up. Eric's name. I answered, keeping my voice even. Yeah. Hey, brother, he said, syrupy sweet. Vivian and I were just talking. She wants to take you to lunch, celebrate your big presentation. How'd it go? I let the silence hang before replying. It was postponed. A fake gasp. No kidding. That's rough. Well, lunch will cheer you up. Rosario's at noon. Our treat. Rosario's. A quiet Italian spot far enough from downtown to avoid the crowd, close enough for discretion. Perfect for whatever they were plotting. I stared at the phone after he hung up, bile rising in my throat. They weren't inviting me to lunch. They were inviting me into the next phase of their plan. I texted Terry, one word, Rosario's. His reply came fast. I'll be there. Stay calm. Play along. I slipped the recorder into my pocket and looked in the mirror. For the first time, I didn't just see a husband or an architect. I saw bait. I arrived at Rosario's 15 minutes early, choosing a booth with clear sightlines to every exit. The place was quiet, a few business types hunched over pasta and laptops. My pulse was steady, but every nerve felt electric. The tiny recorder clipped inside my jacket blinked once armed and ready. At exactly noon, the door opened. Vivian swept in first, draped in a new dress I'd never seen before, something elegant, calculated. Eric followed, freshly groomed, his grin too wide. Too rehearsed. Together they looked like a couple stepping into a date, not siblings-in-law joining me for lunch. Vivian slid into the booth beside me, instead of across her perfume wrapping around me like a lie. Eric dropped into the seat, across his cocky smirk firmly in place. So Vivian purred, resting her hand lightly on my thigh, as if nothing were broken. Tell us about this legal trouble. What kind of issues? Eric leaned forward, eyes sharp. Yeah, man, the cops think you've been creative with the books. He gave a mock frown, dripping false concern. I forced myself to smile, sipping water to buy time. Bank records, forged contracts. They're saying I signed things I don't even remember. Vivian's grip tightened, her voice sweet poison. Evidence can be tricky, can it? The waitress dropped menus we wouldn't touch. My stomach was knotted too tight to think about food, and judging from the way Vivian's nails dug into my thigh, eating wasn't on her mind either. Eric tapped the table with 2 fingers, a nervous rhythm he tried to disguise as casual. Well, he said, his grin flickering, maybe you did sign things and just forgot. You've been under pressure. Long hours. Stress makes people sloppy. His words were rehearsed, a script designed to paint me as unstable. Vivian tilted her head, her voice soft, almost soothing. The important thing, Nick, is that we stick together through this. Family's everything. Family. The word tasted like ash. I leaned back, forcing a calm smile. Funny you should say that, because I know about the storage unit. The color drained from Eric's face. Vivian's hand froze on my leg. I know about the forged insurance documents. I know about your little meetings with Marcus Kellerman. Eric swallowed hard. For the first time in months, his swagger cracked. I don't know what you're talking about. But his voice betrayed him. And in that instant, I knew the mask was slipping. The predators had just realized their prey could bite back. Eric's jaw clenched, his eyes darting around the restaurant as though the walls were closing in. The fake charm, the cool smirk, it all crumbled. He leaned across the table, his voice sharp, venomous. "Listen to me, you sanctimonious bastard," he hissed, gripping my arm hard enough to bruise. "You think you're so much better than me. With your perfect house, your perfect business, you're nothing but a boring middle-aged architect who couldn't even keep his wife satisfied." The room went quiet. Forks paused mid-air. Even the kitchen noise dulled. "Eric, stop," Vivian whispered urgently, her eyes flashing panic. But he was past the point of control. He sneered, lowering his voice just enough for the recorder to catch every word. "Vivian's been faking it for years. Every smile, every kiss, every night in your bed, she told me all about how pathetic you really are." I felt the words cut deep, but I forced myself still, calm, calculated. Then slowly I pulled my phone from my pocket and tapped play. From the tiny speaker, Eric's own voice filled the silence. "By the time we're done with you, you'll be lucky if you're not in prison." His face went white. The trap had snapped shut, and he realized too late he'd walked right into it. Eric froze his hand, slipping off my arm as though it had been burned. Vivian's breath hitched beside me. I could feel the panic radiating from her body. Around us, diners whispered, phones lifted to record. The quiet Italian restaurant had transformed into a stage, and my brother and wife were the unwilling stars of a very public play. I set the phone down on the table, the recording still echoing his threat. "Amazing," I said evenly, "what people will confess when they think they're winning." Vivian's composure cracked. "Nick, please, it's not what it sounds like. It sounds like betrayal." I cut her off. "It sounds like fraud, like insurance scams, like murder plots." Eric shot to his feet, rage and fear warring on his face. "You think this little recording means anything. By the time we're done, no one will believe you." "Funny," I replied, "because they already do." I tilted my head toward the door just as it opened. Detective Chen stepped inside, flanked by two uniformed officers, and blocking the back exit, arms crossed and smirking, stood Terry. Eric's eyes darted wildly, the trap closing. Vivian's hand trembled against the table. And me. For the first time in months, I felt steady. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath as Detective Chen strode forward, badge gleaming under the low lights. Her voice was calm, but carried the weight of finality. "Eric Harrow, Vivian Harrow, you are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder." The words landed like thunder. Gasps rippled through the diners. Phones lifted higher, capturing every second. Vivian's chair screeched back as she stood. "This is a mistake," she cried, mascara streaking, as her carefully crafted mask dissolved. "Nick, tell them you know me." "I would never save it," I said coldly. "The evidence speaks louder than your lies." Eric bolted for the back exit, but Terry stepped into his path, broad shoulders blocking the way. "Going somewhere, little brother?" he asked, voice edged with satisfaction. The officers cuffed Eric as he cursed and struggled, his bravado bleeding into desperation. Vivian's wrists were bound, next her sobs echoing through the restaurant. For a brief second, her eyes found mine, pleading desperate. But I felt nothing. No pity, no love, only the hollow silence of betrayal, finally unmasked. As the officers led them out, the room erupted in whispers and camera flashes. For months, they'd tried to build my downfall. Now I was watching theirs. I sat back down, the recorder still resting on the table, my coffee untouched. Around me, conversations buzzed, diners whispering my name, speculating about the architect whose wife and brother had just been hauled off in cuffs. Some offered sympathetic looks, others simply gawked, hungry for gossip. But I didn't care. Through the front window, I watched the squad cars pull away, red and blue lights reflecting off rain-slick pavement. Eric's face was pale, his jaw tight with rage as he was shoved into the back seat. Vivian slumped forward, her tears streaking down, mascara staining her cheeks. For once, there was no mask left to hide behind. Terry slid into the booth, across from me, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Well," he said, "that went about as smooth as we could hope." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Their whole plan, months of forging papers, setting traps, whispering lies, it just collapsed in 15 minutes. Terry raised an eyebrow. That's the thing about weak foundations. They look strong until pressure hits. I stared down at my trembling hands. My life was shattered. My marriage destroyed, my business tainted. But they were in chains. For the first time, the balance had shifted. By nightfall, the story was everywhere. Local news anchors called it the Harrow Betrayal. My phone buzzed endlessly texts from colleagues, distant relatives, even old classmates who hadn't spoken to me in years. Some sent sympathy, others pried for details. Outside my office the next morning, a small crowd had gathered reporters with cameras, microphones, hungry for a soundbite. "Mr. Harrow, did you know about the affair?" one shouted. Another barked. "How long had your brother been plotting this?" I pushed past them, head down, each question like another stone piled on my back. Inside the office felt hollow. My staff had been sent home by the police after their interviews. The Morrison project had been suspended, clients waiting to see if the allegations were true. My company, my life's work, was on the verge of collapse. Yet the whispers outside weren't just about fraud. They were about betrayal, about family turning against family. In every cafe, every grocery aisle, my name was now a cautionary tale. Terry's voice replayed in my head. Weak foundations crack under pressure. He was right. Theirs had collapsed publicly, but mine was fractured in ways no one could see, and I wasn't sure it could be rebuilt. The following week was a blur of phone calls, frozen accounts, and sleepless nights. My firm, 15 years of sweat and sacrifice, was crumbling in front of me. Without the Morrison project, we had no flagship deal to carry us through the year, and with the police investigation hanging over me, clients began to back away one by one. I sat at my office desk staring at a letter from the bank. "Due to pending allegations, your lines of credit are suspended." The words hit harder than any punch. Eric and Vivian hadn't just tried to kill me. They'd poisoned the very foundation of my livelihood. By forging documents and falsifying signatures, they made it look like I was the thief. To the outside world, I was no longer a respected architect, but a man whose integrity was in question. Worse still, my employees, 12 hardworking people who trusted me, were left in limbo. They had mortgages, families' bills, and now their paychecks were uncertain because of my name being dragged through the mud. I buried my head in my hands. Justice might put Eric and Vivian in prison, but it wouldn't repair the wreckage they left behind. I hadn't just lost a marriage. I was losing everything I'd built. 3 months later, I found myself sitting in a federal building, the walls lined with boxes of evidence. It wasn't just my life on trial anymore. It was Eric and Vivian's entire conspiracy. My attorney, sharp-eyed and relentless, laid out documents one by one. Forged signatures, fraudulent loan applications, insurance policies altered in handwriting that was almost mine but not quite. Detective Chen presented surveillance photos from the storage unit, my routines tracked like prey, my home mapped out like a battlefield. The prosecutors listened, faces grim. The deeper the case went, the uglier it became. It wasn't simply adultery or even greed. It was conspiracy at a federal level, wire fraud, insurance fraud, attempted murder. The charges stacked higher than the blueprints of any skyscraper I'd ever designed. And still, even as their scheme unraveled, the shadow of suspicion clung to me. I'd lost clients, lost contracts, lost faith in the system that once respected me. My lawyer leaned over and whispered, "We'll clear your name, Nick. But the damage, that's another war." I nodded, jaw tight. Clearing my name wouldn't restore my business. It wouldn't rebuild trust. But it might give me the one thing I needed most, the right to start again. The county jail smelled of bleach and despair. I signed the visitor's log with a hand that felt heavier than stone. A guard led me down a corridor where voices echoed off concrete walls, then motioned me to sit at a metal table. A door buzzed, and Vivian walked in. She looked smaller than I remembered, her perfect hair tied back, her tailored suits replaced by a plain orange jumpsuit. For a moment, she tried to summon the old charm, the smile that once disarmed me, but it faltered. "Nick," she said softly, folding her hands, "thank you for coming." I stared at her, my chest hollow. "I wanted to hear it from you. Why? How long was any of it real?" She hesitated, eyes darting down. "It started with Eric's debts. He was drowning, and I was tired of being the perfect wife. He made me feel alive again." Her voice cracked. "I never wanted to hurt you." I leaned back, shaking my head. "You plotted my death, Vivian. That's not just hurting me, that's erasing me." Tears streaked down her face, but I felt nothing. Whatever love had lived between us had died the moment her hand lingered on my brother's chest. The guard brought him in the next day. Eric shuffled to the table in shackles thinner than I'd ever seen him, the cocky grin that once carried him through every disaster gone. He tried to smile anyway. "You look good, brother," he muttered, though his voice was hollow. "You look like hell," I answered flatly. And it was true. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin sallow, his hands twitching like a man who'd finally run out of luck. He slumped into the chair. "I know you hate me, and I deserve it. But you have to understand, I was desperate. The people I owed, they don't negotiate. They break bones, they burn houses. I thought, if we pulled this off, I'd pay them off and we'd disappear." I stared at him, trying to reconcile the boy I once protected with the man who had plotted my murder. Disappear after killing me, after stealing everything I built. He dropped his gaze. "It wasn't supposed to go that far. We started small, just dipping into your accounts. Then Vivian got involved, and it snowballed." I leaned forward. "You want forgiveness, Eric? Start with the truth. All of it. And maybe, just maybe, you'll buy yourself a shred of redemption." 6 months later, I walked into the federal courthouse. The air inside was heavy, almost ceremonial. Reporters lingered in the hallway, cameras ready, whispering about the architect who exposed his own family's murder plot. I took my seat in the gallery as the bailiffs led Eric and Vivian into the courtroom in shackles. Vivian wore a navy suit that looked borrowed, her hair pulled back neatly, her composure rehearsed. Eric looked worse, gaunt, aged decades in months, his once arrogant shoulders slumped forward. Judge Patricia Morrison presided, her voice firm, steady. The defendants orchestrated one of the most elaborate fraud and conspiracy schemes this court has ever seen. They forged documents, stole assets, and plotted the murder of a family member for financial gain. The charges were read: fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder, money laundering. Eric's list stretched longer than Vivian's, but neither could escape the mountain of evidence. The judge sentenced Eric first 22 years in federal prison, no parole for 18. His knees nearly buckled as the guards pulled him back. Then Vivian, 15 years parole possible after 12. Her face remained composed, but her hands trembled against the table. The gavel fell. Just like that, their empire of lies ended with cold, hard years. When the gavel struck, the sound echoed through my bones. It should have felt like victory. Justice had been served. My betrayers, my own wife, my own brother, were led away in chains. Yet as I walked out of that courthouse, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. Reporters swarmed the steps, microphones flashing in my face. "Mr. Harrow, how do you feel about the sentencing?" one asked. I paused, staring at the courthouse doors closing behind me. "Justice was served," I said simply. Nothing more. But inside, the truth gnawed at me. The trial had cleared my name, but it couldn't rebuild my business. Clients had fled, projects dissolved, employees scattered. My reputation was scarred in ways no court ruling could erase. And personally, my family was gone. The woman I had loved for nearly a decade had confessed she'd never truly wanted the life we built. My brother, the kid I'd once defended from bullies, had turned into my would-be executioner. The law had given me closure, but it couldn't give me back what I'd lost. As I stood on those courthouse steps, the cameras flashing, I realized this was not the end of my story. It was the rubble before the rebuild. 3 months after the sentencing, I signed the lease on a modest apartment downtown. Gone was the Victorian house I designed and built with my own hands. The wraparound porch, the curated furniture, the memories that had curdled into poison. My new place was smaller, cleaner, stripped of ghosts. I poured myself into new work, but not architecture. That part of me had been burned to the ground with Harrow and Associates. Instead, I took Terry's advice and began consulting, helping fraud victims, small businesses, even attorneys, untangle webs of lies. I knew the tricks now. I'd lived them. And people trusted someone who had crawled through fire and come out scarred but alive. It wasn't glamorous, but it was meaningful. Each case I cracked, each person I helped rebuild, felt like a quiet victory. For the first time, I wasn't designing buildings, I was designing second chances. Sometimes, late at night, I'd catch myself staring out at the city skyline, the same one I once helped shape. My old life was gone, but a different one had begun. And though the ache of betrayal never fully left, there was a strange comfort in knowing I could survive the worst and still build something new. It was a rainy Tuesday when the letter arrived, the envelope marked with the seal of a federal facility. I nearly tossed it in the trash without opening it. But curiosity, that cruel companion, won out. Vivian's handwriting flowed across 3 pages, still elegant, still precise. "Nick, not a day goes by that I don't regret what I did. Prison has given me time to think, to strip away the lies I told myself. I've been attending therapy, working toward a degree, even found faith. I'm not asking for a second chance, just forgiveness. For the woman who betrayed you, who tried to erase you. I know I don't deserve it, but I had to ask. I read it twice, searching for sincerity, for some remnant of the woman I'd once loved. There were flickers of truth in her words, perhaps. Or maybe just another performance, another mask for survival. In the end, it didn't matter. I fed the pages into the shredder, watching the strips fall into a meaningless heap. Some bridges once burned should never be rebuilt. Forgiveness was for men unscarred, and I was living proof that scars told louder stories than apologies ever could. 3 years have passed since that stormy night when I first saw the truth in my wife's eyes and my brother's smirk. The house is gone, the firm is gone, but I'm still here. I've learned that betrayal doesn't just come from strangers or enemies. It comes from the people closest to you, the ones you'd never suspect. And when it does, it cuts deeper than any blade. But I've also learned something else. You can survive it. I lost everything I thought defined me, my marriage, my family, my career. Yet in the ashes, I built something stronger. Today I help others who've been deceived, ruined, cornered by lies. I give them the tools to fight back. And in their eyes, I see reflections of my own pain and my own resilience. If you've ever felt betrayed, if you've ever watched the life you built crumble overnight, know this: the foundation may crack, but you can rebuild. It takes time. It takes grit, but you can. I'm Nick Harrow, and this is my story. If my journey resonated with you, if you felt even a spark of recognition, subscribe and stay with me. Because the truth is, life will test all of us. The only question is, will you fold or rebuild?